Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here, and I'm back with another video for Spellbinders. Today I'm going to be using some products from the new wine line from Stacey Karen. This is the wine glass bottle tag, and then also the wine corks. So I went ahead and die cut the bottle tag out, and you can see here down at the bottom it does have some areas that also emboss when it die cuts, but I'm not going to be making a tag today. I'm actually going to be using it on a card, so I wasn't even worried about that tag cutting out completely. I just lined it up in my Fiskars trimmer and then just trimmed off the top of it. The reason that I like this particular Fiskars trimmer is because it has the wire guide in it, so you can see exactly where you're cutting. It makes it super easy. So I'm going to set that aside for now, and then I'm going to work on my stamping. This is, well, I used it for, I imagine, yeah, it's probably big enough, probably big enough to fit a card horizontally because it's definitely hanging over the edges. There's a bunch of corks. There's just something about red rubber stamps. I love clear stamps, don't get me wrong. Photopolymer is amazing, but there is no detail like the detail you get from a red rubber stamp, honestly. So I went ahead and stamped these down. I did use Copic Safe ink because I am doing Copic coloring. I'm also working on Nina 80-pound cardstock just because for me the lighter paperweight works better with my Copic markers. So basically, I'm just going to go through and start adding in, like mapping in some shading. I knew because there was varying levels of, I guess, of the corks, that there was going to be some areas that were going to be lighter and darker, but I would be able to pretty much right out the gate do all what I could with the lightest color. You'll also see me adding shading to the tops of the corks. So that way it creates a little bit of dimension. They look more 3D. And then also to the bottoms of the corks, just because when you're looking at things, objects tend to have more of a, I guess, a shadow to the bottom. As I work out from the lightest colors to the darkest, I'm not going to add the darkest color to every single cork. I'm only going to add it where I really want it to be the darkest. So when I bring in my next color, which is the E57, I'm really going to only put that on the one that's the furthest back and then like the next level up. I will put it on top of all of the corks though, because again, I'm trying to create that dimension. There's some areas where I'm only going to add it just on one side because that's the only side of the cork that's tucked back behind another one. I think that this set is super cute, and I have a lot of friends that are wine drinkers. I am not a wine drinker. That's not me. I'm not really a drinker really at all. Not that I have any issue with it. I'm just a super lightweight. And I'm like the cheapest date ever at the bar. Nobody wants to go with me because I have like one drink and you have to walk me to the bathroom. Like, let's be honest, that's not fun for anybody. But so I went to, I cannot remember if I've told this story or not. But anyway, so I went out with some girlfriends, and some of the friends were craft friends, and I had never met them before in real life. Like I knew them online, but I had never really met them, just seen pictures and chatted and things like that. And so one of the girls was drinking red wine, and I'm so I'm so naive. Some of you probably already know what I'm gonna say. So anyway, talking, chatting, she's lovely, blah, 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 blah. I go back to my room with my roommate. And they were like, oh, was it so nice to meet so-and-so in person? And I was like, it really was, lovely. She's so nice. And I said, I was kind of surprised, though, because I've seen pictures of her and her teeth are so white that I was surprised meeting her in person that they weren't. And the girl I was rooming with actually started laughing at me, and she's like, was she drinking red wine? And I was like, yeah, but I don't see what one has to do with the other. She was like, oh no, honey, red wine stains your teeth when you drink it. And I was like, oh, yeah, see, this is, I'm just completely naive and totally ignorant. So apparently That's something that happens if you drink red wine, which if I ever do, I will keep in mind. But I don't. I've never found a wine that I really like the way that it tastes. The closest thing, I mean, it is technically a wine. It's a dessert wine, Moscato. That's the closest thing that I have found. And even then, it has to be like ice cold. And I'm only good for about a half a glass. So after I got done doing all of the shading, I really, the lightest color really lightened everything up, and it was a little bit too light for me. So I went back in and kind of added shading to the left and the right with the E55 and then blended that back out with the E53. I was super happy with the way the corks came out, but I wanted to show you that if you want more texture, because wine corks are pretty textured, you can go back in and do what I'm doing here, which is the stippling technique, which is a series of little dots that you do to add shading, and that would be a way to add some texture. I opted not to do that on every single cork just because I really was happy with the way that they came out. I wanted to do something different. We've talked about a lot about pushing our boundaries with, trying different stamps or trying different products, trying new color palettes. And so I wanted to try kind of a different Copic technique. And so today I'm going to attempt to color a marble countertop. So I didn't want my corks just floating in midair. I knew I wanted to ground them with something as well as this wine glass when we get to that. And I was trying to come up with what I wanted to do, and I thought about maybe doing wood grain, and then I was like, no, I put wood grain on everything because it's so easy. And I already have a lot of brown, so what else can I do? And so I went a-Googling, and isn't Google just the greatest thing ever? Like, I mean, back when I was growing up, we had thesauruses that we had to look in dictionaries, and it took forever to find answers to anything. And now if I can't remember the name of the song, I just Google it. That's not entirely true because I really like to come up with the answer myself. So honestly, I don't Google it right away. I pretty much torture myself until I know I'm absolutely not going to be able to come up with it, and then I Google it. But anyway, so I went Googling and found just some marble colored drawings and pictures of marble and looked at it, and I thought that I could probably try to reproduce it. So that's what you saw me do there with the C1. I always start with my lightest color, especially when it's something that I'm not sure of, because that is the easiest to cover up. So save yourself. It might take a little bit of extra time, but it will be worth it in the end if it goes badly and you have to make do with what you have, because remember, I don't ever start over. So I did all of the little lines, and they're not complete lines. They're more like half lines or little blobs. I wish I could tell you that there was a tried and true design, like do A, B, C, and it will look like G. I did not find that to be true with this technique. So I pretty much just started drawing in some veins randomly. And then the areas that I made bigger blobs where the darker veining would be, I added more shading to. And I'm doing it the same way that I do everything, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. I'm going to be honest, I wish that I had been more confident with my line drawing. I wish that I had been more confident with it and connected more to those lines, and not been kind of just so haphazard about it. I still think that it got the intended effect. So I went in with the lightest color, added shading only to the darker blobby portions, the darker veined portions with the C3, and then finally the C5. And then I went back over all of them to blend them together. And there wasn't a rhyme or reason to my pattern. I looked at several different photos to get an idea of what I wanted. In order to make those softer and to meld kind of together a little bit better, I'm going over the entire countertop with a colorless blender. That is going to lift up some of the color and push it in different areas, so that it looked a little bit more organic. Ultimately, I wasn't completely displeased with the way that it looked. I thought that it still looked interesting enough to be marble-like. Like maybe not marble, but living in the same household with marble, maybe, eating breakfast together and borrowing its sweaters. And that's close enough for me. For my first attempt, which that literally was, you watched it live and in living color, I'm okay with it. So I do think that it is a fun technique, and I do think that it's something that you can definitely do more with, and I would encourage you to try that and see if maybe, that's something you can kind of grow with and add into your backgrounds. I am also adding shading to this wine glass die cut. It was next to impossible to see because I was using a C1 on white and I had a dark background. So I ended up putting it, I figured out, like when I looked up at the camera, I was like, you can see approximately nothing that I am doing. So putting it on a white piece of paper definitely made it easier to see. And so I'm coloring this just like if it had been a stamp. And I was going to color a wine glass. Typically where your stem is, where it's gathered at the base of the glass, it's going to be darker. It's also going to be darker where the stem comes into the very bottom of the cup. That's going to be darker as well. And you're going to have some shading, darker edges kind of up around. I also added to the top a rounded edge so that it would look like the cup was three-dimensional. So I added the rounded edge closer to the top and then also added a little bit of shading to the back. Again, everything the same as far as lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. And then once I was done with the coloring, and I was really happy with the coloring of the glass, you'll see later on I do have to make some modifications to it just because of the way that it looked on the card. So, like I said, not a big wine drinker. I'm just not a big mixed drinker either. I'm that girl. So I'm kind of jelly when people say like, oh, I come home from work and have a glass of wine. And I'm like, but there's no wine I like. I come home from work and have a glass of coffee. A glass of coffee. A cup of coffee. Actually, a 20 ounce of coffee is typically what I do. I have a Dunkin' Donuts addiction. And I would tell you that that's a problem, but I don't really think it's a problem because I love coffee. But anyway, going back to the card very quickly, there are multiple pieces that you can cut out for this tag die, which is totally cute, by the way. You make it all up nice and adorable, and then you hang it on a bottle of wine and give it as a gift. And I think that's super cute because hostess gifts are a thing I think that have gone by the wayside, and that's sad. But anyway, I wanted the coloring of the wine to be consistent and to be bright colors. So I opted to use my Distress inks, and that worked really nicely for this. Once I got everything colored and then I went to put it together, I realized that I didn't go up high enough with my shading, and so I'm going to adjust that so that the glass makes sense. Anyway, back to my coffee addiction. So today I was making sure that I had cleaned out all of my coffee cups because sometimes, honestly, I set them on the countertop. I think that they're empty. They're not really empty. And then it gets really sad in my house because you go to have to pop the top on it and you're like, why? Why did I do that? Why was that a thing that I did? So anyway, I was making sure all of them were empty. And I think that there was honestly, six coffee cups that ended up in the trash can. And that's only from maybe 2 or 3 days. I have a real issue. Not to mention all the coffee I'm actually making in my Keurig. So here's when I put it on the card and I realized that the white on white, because I wanted to leave the top of the card white and really let the corks and the wine glass kind of be the shining stars of the design. I realized that it wasn't enough contrast and it wasn't enough color. So I went in with a B00 and went over my gray lines. And then I thought, okay, well, I'll do the same thing I did with the marble. I'll use the colorless blender. I should not have done that because it did blend them together, but it was almost too much. It lightened it up too much. And then I had to go back in with the C3 and the C1 a little bit to make some adjustments. I picked an even lighter blue to just add a little bit of shading down towards the cup. And then that looked better. It's hard to see again on camera because the background that I have is dark. But when you look at the photos, if you either head over to the blog or look at the photos at the beginning or end of the video, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about, how much more shading is there than what you actually see in the video. Here, I just kind of gave myself a little bit of an outline for where my cup shadow would be sitting on the countertop. I kind of wish I would have taken the shadow back a little bit farther, but Monday morning quarterbacks and all that jazz, honestly, it's not terrible. I decided to pop this up. So I'm using some Scotch foam tape adhesive to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put it right back over that shadow area. We talked about, if you follow my channel, we talked about these dip nails that I have gotten at today, the production of this video. They're grown out about 2 weeks and 3 days. They're super long. It's kind of driving me a little bit crazy, and especially since I was doing little finicky bits with this part. So the cheers is part of the wine corks set. There's a die for the actual corks, and then there's another sentiment and this cheers, and I thought that was super cute. I cut it out of black Simon Says stamp cardstock, but I wanted it to lay flush with the wine glass. So the C and the H actually sit on top of the wine glass, and the rest of it needs to be popped up on foam. With these nails, I was like, oh my word, what have I done to myself? Why did I do this? Trying to peel off those little teeny tiny bits with natural nails is difficult. Trying to do it with dip nails, where they're a little bit thicker, was next to impossible. So moving on from that, I am going to be taking them off soon, and I did tell you guys I would keep you updated. When that happens, I will definitely let you know what ultimately my whole review of having them was. So I have a clear Wink Estella pen here, put that all over the sentiment and then all over the wine in the glass. I wanted this to have a little bit something extra because it is a relatively simple card. I wanted to make that wine glass kind of pop. So I'm going in with Glossy Accents, and I'm going to completely cover the wine portion so that it is nice and shiny. That's one of the things about Glossy Accents that's pretty awesome. You can use it to kind of embellish your cards in a different way that doesn't really add bulk or femininity. I use this a lot for when I make masculine cards, and I just filled that whole thing in. Now, part of it did kind of seep over the edge on the bottom and a little next to the letters. I just use a needle to clean that up. It cleans up pretty easily. And then also, if you have bubbles, you can use the needle to pop it. And if you, like around that cheers, if you needed to get in there with a smaller nib than Glossy Accents offers on its bottle, you could drag it with the needle. That would also work. I picked out a couple of clear sequins just to tie the whole thing together. And again, nightmarish with those nails. Buh, don't do it. For those of you who are doing it all the time, who are crafting like that all the time, God bless you. So I just capped it off with some Glossy Accents and the sequins like I normally do, and then that's the entire card. So like I said, I know the shading on the top is kind of hard to see, but make sure you look at the photos because they definitely show it a lot better. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.